It's wild to think about an event that completely reshaped the global landscape in just a matter of hours. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're breaking down the sudden, massive escalation of the 2026 Iran war. What makes this conflict so deeply fascinating and honestly so tragic is how it kicked off with a total surprise strike right in the middle of incredibly delicate nuclear negotiations. So let's trace exactly how a localized military event sent absolute shockwaves across the entire globe.
Here's our quick roadmap for today. We're going to start with Operation Epic Fury, then look at how the region caught fire, track the human and economic shockwaves, break down the ceasefires that failed, and finally, look at exactly where the conflict stands right now. Okay, let's dive into Section 1. Operation Epic Fury, February 28th, 2026. Picture this. It's the early hours of February 28th, and the night skies over Tehran suddenly light up. In a flash, a decades-long shadow war is changed forever. Operation Epic Fury kicked off with an absolutely unprecedented wave of decapitation strikes by the United States and Israel. We're talking about a matter of hours to wipe out Iran's highest echelon of leadership. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, his inner circle, and senior political and military officials were killed. It was literally one of the most consequential strikes on a sitting head of state in modern history. Now, how this event is viewed really depends entirely on who you ask. The United States and Israel frame these strikes strictly as acts of self-defense, arguing they were absolutely crucial to prevent an imminent nuclear and missile threat. On the flip side, Iran's remaining command structure condemned it as an unprovoked act of war against its national sovereignty, and they vowed immediate retaliation.
But of course, the fallout wasn't just limited to military and political targets. In those very first hours, the human cost started to mount. A widely condemned strike hit a girls' elementary school in the city of Minab. It's a stark, tragic reminder of just how quickly civilians get caught in the crossfire of these massive, high-level actions.
Moving on to Section 2. The region catches fire. The widening retaliation.
Iran's promised retaliation? Well, it came fast, and it came wide. Within just the first week, monitoring groups tracked over 90 Iranian missile and drone attacks aimed at Israel alone, hitting Israeli civilian areas around places like Tel Aviv and Ramat Gan. But they didn't stop there. Missiles also flew toward U.S. military installations across the Middle East, regional oil infrastructure, and commercial shipping vessels near the Strait of Hormuz. The conflict was literally everywhere at once.
And pretty quickly, the rest of the region was dragged into the fray. Lebanon was pulled further in as Hezbollah engaged, even though they were already severely weakened by years of prior strikes. Then you have the Gulf Arab states. Many of them had just spent years trying to normalize relations with Iran, and suddenly they found themselves targeted and isolated. Oh, and global aviation took a massive hit. Commercial flights in and out of the entire Middle Eastern region were completely grounded. So the crucial point here is that by most analytical accounts, within just a few weeks, this sudden escalation exploded into the largest regional war the Middle East had seen since the broader crisis first kicked off back in 2023. The sheer scale of it was just historic. Let's shift to Section 3, Human and Economic Shockwaves, Beyond the Battlefields.
Stepping away from the direct military exchanges for a second, the human toll here was profound. Now, getting an accurate count has been incredibly difficult. Because of restricted internet access and limited media freedom inside Iran, independent confirmation has been really slow. But what is unequivocally clear is that thousands were tragically killed across Iran, Israel, Lebanon, and the Gulf states, with millions more displaced from their homes practically overnight. Alongside the massive human tragedy, global markets reacted with extreme volatility. We saw shipping insurance rates absolutely skyrocket, which made global trade incredibly expensive. Global oil prices swung wildly, regional currencies saw significant drops, and already anxious financial markets were heavily unsettled by all these disrupted trade routes. And this brilliantly illustrates just how interconnected our modern world really is. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the planet's absolute most critical oil choke points. As tanker traffic got threatened, shipping companies were forced to reroute these massive vessels. That single geographical bottleneck triggered widespread fuel shortages rippling all the way through Asia. So a localized military strike literally emptied gas pumps half a world away. Which brings us to Section 4, Ceasefires that failed, the diplomatic standoff.
Let's move to the negotiating table and see how this builds. With the global economy straining and the death toll mounting, getting to peace wasn't simple at all. After the initial outbreak on February 28th,
A US and Iran ceasefire was actually reached around April 7th and 8th, and it even extended to Israel. For a minute, it seemed like the worst was over, but by early June, tensions over access to the Strait of Hormuz caused that ceasefire to fray badly, and heavy strikes resumed. Both sides stepped right up to the brink before a major breakthrough memorandum was finally announced in mid-June.
And we can't forget Lebanon's distinct complications during this period. A U.S.-brokered ceasefire was announced between Israel and Hezbollah, but it almost completely unraveled within hours. An Israeli soldier was killed, Israeli strikes continued into southern Lebanon, and Hezbollah publicly rejected the very terms mediators claimed had been reached on its behalf. It just shows how incredibly fractured every piece of this puzzle really was.
But despite those massive setbacks, a huge diplomatic step was taken to pull the region back from the brink of total devastation. I'm talking about the June 17th Memorandum of Understanding. The presidents of the US and Iran formally signed an agreement. Under this deal, the US lifted its blockade of Iranian ports, Iran was permitted to resume its global oil exports, and a pathway was established to finally unfreeze Iranian assets.
Let's look at Section 5, where the conflict stands, present-day fragility. Now, what's really interesting here is that the June 17th memorandum wasn't some permanent peace treaty on day one. Instead, it established a strict 60-day window intended to formally end the war. Basically, it created a ticking clock for both sides to prove they could actually hold back their fire.
But as you can probably guess, peace here remains incredibly fragile. Just this week, talks were briefly called off completely amid renewed fighting in Lebanon, right before a ceasefire was restored. And meanwhile, US and Iranian officials are still sending out highly conflicting signals about how much true progress has actually been made behind closed doors. The final shape of this conflict is very much still being negotiated. So what does this all mean for us? What began as a surprise strike during nuclear negotiations has become one of the defining conflicts of the decade. And its true human and economic costs? Well, they might not be fully understood for years to come. So I leave you with this. Will the June 17th memorandum actually hold long enough to end the war for good? As of this explainer, the final chapter of the 2026 Iran war is still unwritten.